Greetings, math fans. All right, so this is worksheet 5, and I basically, for the lesson, I just did several of these problems, and just because you don't have, otherwise you have like 35 problems to do. So I'm just going to kind of go over this really quickly. I'm actually going to do every one of the problems, just in case you have questions about them, or you just want to see how to do the problems. But basically, this is the type of problem that you're going to see on the Harper final exam. Okay, so and it's a lot of factoring. It's the square root method, completing the square, quadratic formula, a mix of everything, just to make sure you know what you're doing, and then something called the discriminant to see how many solutions you have, and then cross multiplying. So this covers a good chunk of like I said, of the final exam. So let's get going here. The first thing is solve by factoring, of course, and we're going to use the X method here, and we're going to put an 8 here and a -6 here. All right, so again, I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. What multiplies give you 8 and adds to give you -6, well, it's -2 and -4. That multiplies to give you 8, and if you say -2 minus 4, it's 6. So you get x minus 2 and x minus 4 equals 0, right? And then you guys know, again, I'm not going to show a lot of work. It's x minus 2 equals 0, so x equals 2 and x equals 4. You guys should know how to do that. All right, this next one, I'm going to move, I'm going to keep that 3x squared positive, so I'm going to add 6 and subtract 11x from all sides. So you get 3x squared minus 11x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, remember what you do for the x method for this one is you say 3 times -6, which is -18, and then you put the -11 here. Okay, so the numbers that give you -18, and you know, when you multiply them, they give you -18. When you add them, they give you -11. So one has to be positive, one has to be negative. And so you're going to basically kind of a brain fart here for a second. I don't know why I put -6. It should be +6 here. Okay, that actually is a big deal. So that's positive 18. So let me just get rid of this. There you go. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So now I'm thinking, wait, what? Nothing works. So of course, in this case here, it's going to be -9 and -2. All right. So you have x minus 9 and x minus 2. And again, do the slide and divide. Don't forget to divide each of these by 3. Okay. So if you do that, you get x minus 3. And you get, remember we slide this over, so we get 3x minus 2 equals 0. And then this one is x equals 3, and this one is x equals 2/3. Okay, and again, you guys should know how to do that once I do the factoring. Okay, so this one's a little bit different. It's the greatest common factor, so we're going to factor a 5x out of here. So you get 5x times 2x plus 7. And so 5x equals 0, 2x plus 7 equals 0. So this one x equals 0, right? If I divide by 5, I get 0. And this one is x equals -7/2. Okay, moving on. This is another x method here. This is in the correct order. So it's 2 times -6 is -12 and 11 here. So the only one that really works is 12 and -1. 12 times -1 is -12, and 12 minus 1 is 11. So that's good. So it's, I know it's an x, I don't care. So I'm going to do x plus 12 and x minus 1. And then make sure you divide by that 2, right? So it's x plus 6, and move the 2 over, so 2x minus 1. And you set those equal to 0, so x equals -6, and x equals 1/2. Okay, this is a difference of 2 squares. Okay, again, it's just another kind of factoring. You recognize it because these are all perfect squares and there's a minus sign between them. So if you remember, you get 3x over here, and 4, square root of 16 is 4, and then plus or minus. So it's 3x plus 4 equals 0, and 3x minus 4 equals 0. So you wind up getting x equals -4/3, and x equals +4/3. Okay, this one's the greatest common factor. It might look like a difference of 2 squares, but it's not, because you have an x. If that was just x squared minus 4, it would be a difference of 2 squares, but the greatest common factor is x. So I factor an x out of there, and I get x equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. So this one's already solved, and I add 4, I get x equals 4. So 0 and 4. Okay? Square root method. Okay? Basically what you're doing is just, if you notice that these just have squares and they don't have like y's, like it's not x squared plus 2x minus 169. It's just x squared minus 169. So basically, I'm going to add 169 to both sides. So I get x squared equals 169. I take the square root. So x equals plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus, 13. That's it. Okay, so in this one, I'm going to add 25 to both sides. So 4y squared equals 25. Divided by 4, so y squared equals 25 fourths. But then I'm going to take the square root. And just remember, guys, when you take the square root, don't forget the plus or minus. And the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 4 is 2. So it's plus or minus 5 halves. This one's a little bit different. So we're going to subtract 5. So b squared equals negative 64. Remember, guys, when you have a negative, you take the square root of negative, you pull out an I. Sounds violent, but that's what it is. So b is equal to plus or minus 8i. The square root of 64 is 8. And then the negative makes it 8i. Okay. This one, basically, the squared part is already isolated, which is good. So I take the square root of both sides. So I get x minus 5 equals plus or minus 7. And then I set up two problems. So x minus 5 equals 7, and x minus 5 equals negative 7. So I add 5 to both sides, x equals 12. Add 5, x equals negative 2. Okay. The first thing I do with this one is divide by 3. So I get 2x minus 1 squared is equal to 18. And I take the square root. So 2x minus 1 equals plus or minus 18 is 9 times 2, or 3 times 3 times 2, right? So I can pull 3 out, so it's 3 root 2. Okay, and then I need to continue solving. So 2x equals 1 plus or minus 3 root 2, and I divide everything by 2. So that's what x equals. Move this down just a little bit. X equals basically 1 plus or minus 3 root 2 over 2. Okay, looks kind of complicated, but it's not that bad. Okay, so this next one I'm going to divide by negative 5. So a plus 1 squared equals negative 16. Now you can have an I here. Take the square root, so a plus 1 equals plus or minus 4i. And then you just subtract 1 from both sides. So you can't do anything and add those together. So a is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 4i. Okay? So that is the square root method. Now completing the square. Again, if you're not, I'm just going to kind of cover it now. But if you're not sure, go back and look at one of the videos. I mean, you have to kind of go back a little bit and search which video it is and do completing the square. Okay? Anyway, this is how you do it. First of all, it's got to be equal to 0. Well, actually, you add 20 first. You put the number on the other side. So it's x squared plus 10x equals 20. Okay, that's got to be on the right side. Okay? So you're taking half of that number. So half of 10 is 5. Circle it and square it. So I'm going to actually I don't know why I'm going to get rid of this circle right there. Because I don't like that. Okay, so I circle it and I square it and I get 25. So what you're going to do is you're going to add 25 to both sides. The reason I circled it is because now you're going to say x plus 5. Whatever that number was, it's x plus 5. So that number goes right there. Equals 20 plus 25 right here, which is 45. And now you use this, and by the way, this is squared. So it's x plus 5 quantity squared equals 45. Then you use the square root method. Okay? So now I take the square root of both sides. So you get x plus 5 equals plus or minus, and 45 is 3 times 3 times 5. So it's 3 root 5. Okay? And then your last step is subtract 5. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus 3 root 5. That's your answer to that problem. Okay? So same thing with this one. I'm going to add 12 first. So I get x squared minus 8x equals 12. I take half of negative 8, which is negative 4. I circle it, I square it, I get positive 16. So add 16 to both sides. So the reason I circled it is because then it's x minus 4 quantity squared equals 12 plus 16, which is 28. Then I take the square root of both sides. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus, and 28 is 2 times 2 times 7. So it's 2 root 7. And then, I don't know, I put the parentheses here. I'm going to get rid of those parentheses, because I took the square root of it, and I just get x minus 4. So my last step here, math fans, is I want to add 4 to both sides. So I get x equals 4 plus or minus 2 root 7. Okay. Okay, 2 more here. Take half of 12 is 6. Circle. Oh, wait. Oh, what did I not do? Gotta subtract 36 first. Sorry. Erase this. Subtract 36 first, and now I'm good. So x squared plus 12x equals negative 36. So now I'm going to take half of 12, which is 6. I'm going to square it and get 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. So remember, I had that 6, I circle it. So it's x plus 6 squared equals 36. Negative 36 plus 36 is 0. So that actually turns out to be 0, which is okay. If I take the square root of both sides, it's x plus 6 equals, there's no plus or minus 0, it's just 0. And so I subtract 6, so I get x equals negative 6. Okay, not too bad. And last one, going to subtract 40 from both sides. So x squared minus 14x equals negative 40. Half of negative 14 equals negative 7. Circle it and square it. That's 49. So I add 49 to both sides. So I get x, remember the circle, x minus 7 squared equals 9. I take the square root of both sides. So x minus 7 equals plus or minus square root of 9 is 3. And so I get two problems. I get x minus 7 equals negative 3, and x minus 7 equals positive 3. So I add 7 to both sides, you get x equals 4. And I add 7 to that side, I get x equals 10. Okay. All right, now we move on to the quadratic formula. You got to know that nice little friendly formula. I'm just going to write it in the corner here. X equals opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Okay, and just remember, it's always ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It's got to be in that form. Okay, so in this case here, like that 2 is my a, the negative 3 is b, and c is 15. So you just plug it in your calculator. So x equals opposite of b, so positive 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 15. All over 2 times 2. So that gives me 3 plus or minus, and that's basically 9, 9 minus 120 over 4. So it's 3 plus or minus, if I subtract that, I get the square root of negative 111 over 4. So this one's a little bit different because I can't do anything with the square root of 111, but I got to pull an I out. So x comes out to be negative 3 plus or minus I root 111 over 4. Okay. So same thing, a is 1, b is 2, and c is negative 5. So x equals opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 2 squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times 1. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus, that's 4 plus 20 is square root of 24 over 2. I can simplify square root of 24. It's basically 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So I can pull a 2 out. So I get x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 root 6 over 2. And then I can split this up. So it's basically negative 2 over 2 plus or minus 2 root 6 over 2. So 2 over 2 is negative 1 plus or minus, that's also 1. So it's negative 1 plus or minus root 6. Okay? Okay, a little more quadratic formula here. Again, that's my A, that's my B, that's my C. So x equals opposite of B. So 4 plus or minus the square root of B squared, negative 4 squared, minus 4 times A, oops, times C, all over 2 times A. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of, basically it is, if I add all it together, I'm just going to do it quickly, it's negative 24 over 10. So let's pull an I out, and I can actually pull 24 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So I can pull a pair of 2's out. So it's negative 2i. Or, sorry, just 2i. Let me get rid of that little schmutzky there. Okay. So it's 2i, and then left over is root 6 over 10. All right, so I can split that up again. X equals 4/10 plus or minus 2i root 6 over 10. Okay, so 4 over 10, x equals 2/5. If you can reduce that in your calculator, plus or minus I root 6 over 5. That's your answer. Okay, last one, I'm going to subtract 8 because it needs to be in that form. Ax squared plus bx plus c. So 3x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. Okay, quadratic formula. Again, that's A, that's B, and that's C. So x equals opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared, which is 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8, all over 2 times 3. So I get basically negative 10 plus or minus, I put all it together in my calculator, I get 196 over 6. So square root of 196 actually is 14. So negative 10 plus or minus 14 over 6. So if I split it up, I get, because I can do, in this case here, these are all whole numbers, so I can say negative 10 plus 14, which is actually 4 over 6. And negative 10 minus 14, which is negative 24 over 6. So this one reduces to 2/3. That one reduces to negative 4. And those are my two answers, 2/3 and negative 4. Okay? All right, so the next group here, math fans, this video is getting a little long. But this next video, or the next group of problems is basically you pick which way you want to do it. Okay? Okay, so how do you pick which one to use? Well, you try to do factoring first. That's like the very first one. And like, I know I have to do factoring for this first one. It's, by the way, it's equal to 0, which is actually important, right? And then I'm going to divide or factor out a 3x. I mean, you could use quadratic formula for every single problem. That's complicated. In fact, I would probably not even use the quadratic formula very often. I would actually try to complete the square unless the problem was kind of nasty, which I don't know if we're going to get to one of those. Okay, so basically I divide by 3x. So I factor out a 3x, and I get x minus 5 equals 0. So 3x equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0. So divide by 3, x is 0, and add 5, x is 5. Okay, that's pretty easy. This next one, I mean, again, you want to use the square root method here. So we're going to add 50 to both sides. So a squared equals 50. So I take the square root, a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 50. Now 50 is basically 5 times 5 times 2. So I pull 5 out. So a is equal to plus or minus 5 root 2. Okay, moving on. You try to factor it first. And in this case here, if you would try to factor it, you would actually get, you try to do 2 times 5 is 10, but 2 plus 5 is not 6. So you actually can't factor that. So you can always use the square root or the complete the square. That usually works. Okay, I don't think you're going to need anything too crazy where you actually have to use quadratic formula. You can, but square root method or completing the square works. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So you get x squared plus 6x equals negative 10. And then I'm going to take half of 6, which is 3, and I'm going to square it, which gives me 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So remember that I circled that 3 now, okay, because we're going to use it. So it's actually x plus 3 squared is equal to negative 10 plus 9 is negative 1, okay? And then I take the square root of both sides. So x plus 3 equals equals plus or minus, and square root of negative 1 is I. So your last step is subtract 3 from both sides. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus I. Okay. Next one, definitely you can do square root method, or you can do difference of two squares. But I'm going to use square root method because I like square root method. So x squared equals 64. Take the square root of both sides. X equals plus or minus 8. Okay. So that's your answer for that one. That was pretty easy. This one, the only way to do this one is quadratic formula or factoring. And actually this one does factor nicely. Most of them really will for you. Unless it's something crazy, but most of it will factor for you. So anyway, let's do the x method for this one. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and a 3 goes here. So what multiplies to give you negative 4 is 4 and 1. One of them is negative, so then 1 is the 3, or the 1 is negative, because 4 minus 1 is 3. So there you go. You factor, you get x plus 4 and x minus 1 equals 0. So remember, don't forget, divide by the 4 now. So you wind up getting x plus 1, and slide it over, and you get 4x minus 1. So this one's easy. X plus 1 equals 0, and 4x minus 1 equals 0. So I solve, x equals negative 1, and this one comes up to be x equals 1/4. And those are your two answers for that problem. Okay, this one's definitely the square root method. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So negative 2 parentheses 2x plus 1 squared equals 18. Divided by negative 2. So 2x plus 1 squared equals negative 9. And then take the square root. And remember, we got a negative under the square root, so you get an I. So it's 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus 3i. We subtract 1, so you get 2x equals negative 1 plus or minus 3i, and then divide by 2. So you can even leave it like that. X equals negative 1 plus or minus 3i over 2. Okay, it's not bad. Next one, definitely square root method. Subtract 50 from both sides, so it's a squared equals negative 50. Take the square root of both sides. A is equal to, I'm going to pull an I out right away. It's plus or minus, by the way. 50 is 5 times 5 times 2. So a is equal to plus or minus, I can pull 5 out. So it's 5i root 2. Okay. This one, I know nothing multiplies to give you 1 and adds to give you 4. So you have to use square root method. Keep saying square root method. You have to use completing the square. Okay, so complete, I'm going to write this out. Complete the square. Okay, so we got half of 4. And, oh wait, it's getting a little late here, I guess. I'm making a couple mistakes. So I'm going to subtract 1 first. And so I get x squared plus 4x equals negative 1. So half of 4 equals 2. Circle square equals 4. So you add 4 to both sides. And remember, it's x plus 2 squared equals 3. All right, that's cool. Take the square root of both sides. So it's x plus 2 equals plus or minus root 3. And the last thing is subtract 2 from both sides. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. Okay, almost there. I'm going to basically, if I would move the 7 over to try to factor it, there's nothing that multiplies to give you 7 and adds to give you 2. Okay? Unless you see something really obvious, but otherwise you need to complete the square. So, 7's over there already, so I'm going to take half of 2, which is 1, circle it, square it, I get 1. So you get x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 7 plus 1. Add 1 to both sides. And that gives you, I circled it, x plus 1 squared equals 8. So I take the square root of both sides, so it's x plus 1 equals plus or minus 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So I can pull a pair of 2's out, so it's 2, and I got a 2 left over. Now my last step is subtract 1 from both sides, so x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 root 2. Okay, and the last problem, oh, that's set up for square root method. So it's y plus 4 equals plus or minus 5. And so I have two problems here. Y plus 4 equals negative 5, and y plus 4 equals positive 5. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So y equals negative 9, and subtract 4 from this one, and y equals 1. Okay? All right, we're getting there. I might have this done in 30 minutes, so it's good. Okay, so here's the deal. We're talking about the discriminant now, guys. Okay, and the discriminant, which is this word right here, the discriminant is literally just b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so you plug in a, b, and c. The way it is though, b squared minus 4ac, and you're gonna get a number, and that's what you're gonna write down in the first blank. And the second blank is gonna say the number and type of solutions. So basically you have three possibilities. If it is greater than 0, which means it's positive, you have 2 real solutions. Okay, if it's equal to 0, you have 1 real solution. And if it's less than 0, you have 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, and basically, let's talk about x-intercepts too. So if I say x-intercepts, this is kind of going up because I ran out of room here. If it's 2 real solutions, it's going to cross the x-axis twice. If it's 1 real solution, it's going to cross it 1 time. And if it is 2 imaginary solutions, it's 0 times. That should be on your note sheet. Okay, that's important. So then when you do these problems, it's really pretty easy. Again, you plug it into b squared minus 4ac. So let's do that. That's a, that's b, and that's c. Okay, so it's b squared, so it's 1 squared minus 4 times a times c. So basically I get 1, and just be careful with your calculator, you type the whole thing in, and you wind up getting 129. That's your discriminant. Okay, and then I ask you number and types of solutions. 2 real solutions. That's your answer for that one. And number of x-intercepts, again, look at that chart. It's 2 x-intercepts. Okay, so here it is, a, b, and c. So it's b squared minus 4 times a times c. So it's 9 minus 44, which is negative 35. That's the discriminant. Be careful when you're squaring that negative 3, right? You got to put in parentheses or just ignore the negative and just say 3 squared. It doesn't matter. It's going to become positive anyway. So the number of type solutions is 2 imaginary solutions. And the number of x-intercepts is 0. Got to know that. 0 x-intercepts. Basically what the first graph looks like, guys, this is what I mean by an x-intercept. It's got 2 solutions, so that's a solution. Solutions are where it crosses the x-axis. So when it's 2 imaginary solutions, this is what it looks like. It never even crosses the x-axis. That's why it's 0 x-intercepts. Okay? And then, we're almost there. So A is 2, B is negative 12, and C is 18. So it's B squared, so negative 12 squared, minus 4 times A times C. So again, negative 12 squared is 144. Minus all that stuff, and you wind up getting a discriminant equal to 0. So that's the discriminant. The number of type solutions is 1 real solution, and number of x-intercept is 1. So this is what that graph looks like. It's how many times does it cross the x-axis. So only crosses it, just touches it. So 1 time. That's why it's 1 x-intercept. Okay. And the last one. Remember, if you're missing a letter, So A is 1, B is 0, because you don't have B, and C is 5. So it's B squared, so 0 squared minus 4 times A times C. Okay, so it's basically 0 minus 20, which is negative 20. So it's negative 20 is your discriminant. It's 2 imaginary solutions. And how many times across the x-axis? Just like this one, number 32. It didn't cross it, so there's no x-intercepts. Okay? All right, last thing, and you'll see these problems on the final exam. That's why they're here. You got to cross multiply, guys. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you know, like on a test, but you should know to cross multiply. So just be careful. It's 2 parentheses 3x plus 4 equals 5 times 7. All right, cross multiply. Okay, so it's 2, 3x plus 4 equals 35. Actually, I should have distributed. So it's 6x plus 8 equals 35. Subtract 8 from both sides. So 6x equals 17. Or 27, sorry, 27. And then divide by 6. So you get x equals 9 halves. And I don't care if you put 4.5 either way. It doesn't matter. If you put in your calculator, who cares? Okay, same thing with this one. It's 3 parentheses 2x plus 8 equals 5 times 4. So 3 times 2x plus 8 equals 20. Divide by 3. X equals 20 over 7. Or, sorry. It's, let me erase this. It's 2x plus 8 equals, am I good here? No. This is the way I wanted to solve it. Sorry. It is a different way to solve it, but that's not the way I want to show you. Okay? So you wind up getting, if I distribute the 3, this is the way I want to do it. So 6x plus 24 equals 20. There we go. Okay? Subtract 24 from both sides. So 6x equals negative 4 and divide by 6. So x equals negative 2/3. Or, I don't care, negative 0.67 is okay too. Okay? So I literally did every one of the problems on your worksheet. So hopefully that helps you. And it was about 33 minutes long. And you guys need to know this for the final. All right? That's it, my fans. Have an outstanding day. Adios. Goodbye.